apparently things are going down in the OCG right now with this new dragon Handtrap. And just for quick context, before we start watching the new Sunny video, I don't know if he goes over the effect of the card again, but hold up, let me just pull it up real quick so we all are on the same page. What we are talking about here. So, Hydraulis Harmonia. When your opponent activates a monster effect on the field, quick effect, you can reveal this card in your hand and up to 5 synchros in your extra deck. Apply these effects in sequence based on the total number revealed. Also, you cannot activate the effects of monsters special summoned from the extra deck until the end of your next turn, except synchro monsters. If you reveal 2 cards total, special summon this card. If you reveal 4+ total, send one of the revealed monsters to the grave. If you reveal 6 cards total, destroy 1 monster your opponent controls. And of course, if you reveal 5 synchros in your extra deck and this card in your hand, that is 6 cards total. So it counts itself in the hand. So if you reveal 5 synchros, which is obviously what you're going to do if you play this card, you don't want to reveal just like less. You're going to go for the maximum potential at all point. You're going to get a non-target destroy. You're going to send the synchro from your extra deck to the graveyard, and you're summoning a 2500 beat stick that is also a tuner and a dark dragon. This card is or reads pretty hype as a new relatively generic hand trap. Of course, you want to be mainly playing it in synchro decks or decks that don't care about the don't care about the extra deck at all. But you're getting a lot of value from one card. And this card seems, in my opinion, both insanely strong, but also pretty fun. I like this kind of style of interruption because it's not straight up just like negate a card. This is a card that can do a lot of different things, but mainly it's removal based, but it also like gets you a little bit of board presence at the same time, which I personally is a very healthy direction for the game to go in. And these cards need to be powerful in order to have any impact, because no one's going to play a Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit for removal. We need cards to do more these days, and this is a better way to do it than to just print like infinite copies of Dominus Impulse or Purge or Ash or Imperm. I like it when it's removal based rather than negation based. That is my personal opinion on the card, even though I do realize I think it's a very, very powerful card. So in the OCG, apparently this card has been going crazy. So let's hear about it from our favorite OCG YouTuber, Sunny.
So if you've been following the OCG at all after the release of Blazing Dominion, you have probably seen that it is currently being taken over by the new hand trap, Tianjulong. The English name is something crazy, so I'm just going to call it the dragon. Now, this card
Wait, what's crazy about the English name? Hydraulis Harmonia?
Release was hyped to oblivion, but I'll say it has not only delivered on its hype, but it has vastly exceeded it because it is powerful to a borderline meta warping level. As in, it is almost a requirement for your deck to play this card if it is good.
Okay.
It's hard to say because the best decks, with the exception of branded Draco Tail, were already capable of playing this. But you'll see.
See, that's the interesting point, right? Like, is it so powerful that you stop playing a deck that doesn't have synchros? Like, is it a requirement to the point of every deck in the metagame needs to be a synchro deck? Like, for example, branded Draco Tail cannot play this card. You don't have enough synchros in the extra deck. You don't want to be locked into synchro effects. None of that is something you can do in branded Draco Tail. Will you single-handedly, because this card exists, will people stop playing branded Draco Tail altogether because you want to play a synchro deck, right? I guess, well, that's what we're discussing.
What I mean when I go over what decks are using it right now. I personally kind of wish they never made this card.
Okay.
So I wanted to go over the card because it reads strong, but reading the card alone does not necessarily explain why it is so reliable in the context of the OCG. So the card has one effect, but it does 3 things. It is a quick effect to respond to a monster effect that activates on the field, and then you're locked out of activating the effect of non-synchro monsters from the extra deck until the end of the user's next turn. First, the card reveals itself and up to 5 synchro monsters from your extra deck, and then it gains up to 3 effects depending on how many you reveal.
Okay, I guess we didn't have to read it.
There's no reason to ever reveal less than 6, so you're always going to reveal 6 and you will always get all 3 effects. So the first is, if you reveal 2+, it summons itself, and it's a pretty good body. It has bestial stats and attribute, except it's a level 7 and a tuner. This is very good as it has Destrudo properties with much better stats, and we all know how important it is to have.
Does the OCG still have Baron the Fleur? I think so, right? Master Duel has it. I think the OCG also has it. Okay. Because that does significantly increase the quality of a high-level tuner in the OCG over the TCG. Like, if there's any deck that has level 3 non-tuners, if you can make Baron instead of whatever we would be making in the TCG, that is a massive difference.
With a hand trap that's also a good body. So for example, Bestials have borderline made DD Crow obsolete. Even though Crow can hit spells and traps, it can hit non-light and darks, and it doesn't need your opponent to have a monster. Part of that is because Bestials have very good additional effects, but another part of the reason is that they are a body.
That's why Radiant Typhoon is playing it. Oh yeah, Radiant Typhoon is a great example. You've got a lot of easy to summon level 3 tuners, non-tuners, and even if you're locked into Wind, you can still make Baron with this. Yeah.
Basically, there is a precedent for hand traps to power creep newer hand traps with a body. The second is if you reveal 4.
Also, it's worth mentioning that, and I think this is something I missed when I read it for the first time, it doesn't lock you from summoning from the extra deck. It just says you can't activate the effects of monsters special summons. So you can still, for example, establish an IP Masquerena, or you can still make Heraldic Seals with this because it's a dragon. And you can also, in Radiant Typhoon, because that's just an example that you just brought up, and that made me think of this, you can still make the Link 2, pass your turn, then the lock is over, and then when you activate a quick play spell, you can still place the continuous trap on your opponent's turn to get that effect, right? So it's not as restrictive as it could have been, and maybe should have been.
Plus, it sends one of the synchros to the graveyard. Now, we've seen cards like this before. We've seen X-Ryzeal, Fallen and the Virtuous, but this is really the first time something like this is on a hand trap. This is obviously very beneficial because sending extra deck monsters can access their graveyard effects, and luckily for the format, they decided to make this for synchro monsters. If they made this for fusions...
It's until the end of the next turn, no? Yeah, but it's a hand trap, so you're using it when your opponent goes first on their first turn. Then it's your turn, you are locked, you make the Link 2, you pass turn, you are no longer locked.
It would be game-ruiningly powerful, but because the synchros are comparatively mediocre to send, it ends up being okay. There are still very good targets for this, such as Malung and Backpit, which serve as an interrupt, but you can also send Wind Pegasus or Omega to get value on your turn, or you can send Herald if that helps your deck start. If you reveal...
Right. One particularly big difference between the OCG and the TCG for this card as well is they still have Herald of the Arclight, which means that this card goes crazy in Mitsurugi for them, right? Like, pure Mitsurugi is already a very strong deck over there, because they also have, like, they have the new Ritual Demise thingy that lets you copy Mitsurugi Ritual's effect. So pure Mitsu for them is already stronger than it is for us. They can play this hand trap, which gives them an interruption, like a non-target pop, a monster on the board, and you get to search Habakiri with it. And then, like, in Mitsurugi itself, like, this card is, like, the lock is not particularly bad, because you can just play with your... You can just play with your ritual monsters, and it doesn't stop you from ending on IP Masquerena or Dynamondo and just use the effect the turn after when you're not locked anymore. So this card is insane with Mitsurugi.
6, then you also non-targeting pop a monster. If you could just do that alone, there would be metas where that effect is better than something like Ogre, which already sees play. But then this is a body and another effect. So now that we've gone over the 3 effects, it seems pretty obvious why this card is very powerful, but it has more reasons why the card is much stronger than it seems. So the first is that the lock is not...
Oh yeah, it's also really good in the clown archetype, right? Because Herald of the Arclight can search their starter. Yeah.
Necessarily a real lock. It doesn't lock you into synchros, it locks you into synchro effects, which may initially seem like the same thing, but really isn't.
Okay.
That means that all decks that have multiple types of extra deck monsters but don't need the effects can still use them, such as the new clown deck, or you can just make the extra deck monsters if they fulfill some sort of engine requirement, or you just need to send monsters to the graveyard. Even if the card said you can only summon synchro monsters, then I still feel like it wouldn't be amazing design because it is an extremely powerful card. Like every single deck that can play the Dominus card.
I don't agree necessarily with that, because I think power, I mean, I guess it's a valid point to say I think this card is too powerful, they shouldn't have made it. I personally think it goes a little bit deeper. I think power itself is not necessarily bad. I like playing with powerful cards as long as what these cards do is healthy. Which I'm not saying that that's what applies to this card, but one of my favorite examples of this is SP Little Knight. SP Little Knight. SP Little Knight is an extraordinarily powerful card that's been a staple in basically every single deck since it's been printed. I personally don't have an issue with SP Little Knight. I mean, of course, sometimes I play a deck and I get frustrated because SP Little Knight is really powerful and it banishes my Runic Fountain or whatever, and that's like, okay, why does it do that? But realistically, SP Little Knight is a very interactive and a very fun card to play with because it's removal based. It's not the greatest, it's not like the craziest end board piece or anything, but for the most part, it's a very, very interactive Yu-Gi-Oh card. And that's where, for example, because he's mentioning like Dominus Impulse as an example, or like as a comparison, I think that's a vastly different thing because Dominus Impulse is a very powerful card, but Dominus Impulse, in my opinion, is just way less interesting than something like SP Little Knight, because Dominus Impulse is just your opponent does X, you negate X. And that is, it's not the same level of interacting with your opponent that like an SP Little Knight provides. And when I look at this card, besides the capability of just searching Habakiri, which is not possible in the TCG, I think this card is going to be pretty interactive, all things considered, because it doesn't, like I said earlier, it doesn't straight up negate what your opponent is trying to do. So from my perspective, this looks like a fun card to play with. I would rather, when I'm going first, I would rather my opponent have this card than my opponent open Ash Impulse or something like that, right? Even if this is a powerful card, that is definitely going to give my opponent a chance to compete in the game, and they can use it at different spots to get the maximum value from the removal and stuff like that. I think this card is way more interesting to play and play against than just like Dominus Impulse, right? Of course, I can understand that in the OCG, they're looking at it even like a little bit more, like a little differently, because it makes Baron the Fleur. It sends Arclight to search Habakiri. Like, those are some very, very powerful uses for the card that definitely benefit some decks a lot more than others. So I don't know if maybe it's a little bit too powerful over there, but I think just card is powerful alone is not enough reason for me to hate a card, basically. I care more about what the card does, what the card plays like, and inherently I don't really have an issue with how this card plays. Another problem, and this is something that a lot of you guys are mentioning already, is that this card is incredibly sought after and incredibly expensive even for OCG standards, which of course usually as TCG players we always look at the OCG and we're like, damn, I wish our cards were as affordable as theirs. But people have been saying in chat like this card is, I don't know how much exactly in the OCG, but apparently it's really, really sought after, sold out everywhere, and hard to get compared to what cards usually are in the OCG, like 60-70 bucks if you translate it to our currencies, which is of course a problem. All of the things that we've just talked about are purely gameplay related. Those are the things that I've been discussing so far. I really liked the direction that Yu-Gi-Oh has gone in recent months for the TCG as well, because even though it's not cheap by any means yet to play Yu-Gi-Oh, it's gotten more and more affordable compared to what it was. It would be a shame if cards like this make us take a step back in the wrong direction. However, the way it's looking so far, like, I mean, any educated guess, this card is going to be a secret rare, right? Like, it's got to be. Maybe if they want to be really kind, they could do the Fenrir thing or the Magnamud thing and make it a super or an ultra. That would be really nice, but even as an ultra rare, this card would probably be expensive. And I mean, we all remember 20 euro super rare Magnamuds, right? Like, even if it's a super rare, it's not going to be cheap, right? Unless, and this is pure copium, unless the new overframe stuff makes product more desirable and shifts a little bit of the value, but that is a lot of copium. Like, realistically, this card is going to be expensive.
Would play the Dominus card, so every synchro deck in the future would have to be designed with this card in mind. And that means that this card's existence would cap the power level of synchro decks engines. But this card doesn't even do that. The second thing that needs to be observed is that unlike the most powerful hand traps, which are the Charmies, these... That point is true. That point is valid. With this card existing, you're gonna have to think twice about any synchro deck that you make in the future. I guess the easiest way, it's not that hard though.
because the easiest thing to do when you design a synchro archetype from now on, if you want them to not play this card, all you have to do is make them reliable on like one other extra deck mechanic. You know, like make a synchro deck that really wants to make a link monster and use the effect in the combo, or make a synchro archetype that wants to synchro, wants to exceed once or something, right? But yes, this is going to restrict future design of synchro archetypes. That is fair enough. But that, once again, is also something that every single relevant non-engine card kind of does. You know, they have to design cards with the existing cards in mind. That's, yeah.
Have no field restriction, which means that this card is usable going first and second. And that's an aspect where I find this card really annoying.
Yes.
Yes, it is an extremely powerful going second.
Yes, that's the best point so far. This is also something, I think we talked about this when this card was released and when we saw it for the first time. I really think we are at a point in Yu-Gi-Oh's lifespan where they need to make non-engine cards stronger going second than going first, and this is the one thing that this card does not do. This card is just basically the same whether you're going first or second. You can use it with a board, you can use it at any point, so it's just going to make your boards stronger. And this is something that, like, the card, look, I'm not asking for every single card to be unusable going first like the Mole Charmies, because that, I think, makes for some frustrating experiences as well. Like, imagine your entire non-engine is dead when you go first, like 15 cards in your deck that do nothing when you start, and then you normal summon, you get impermed, you pass turn, and all of your cards are dead because you have a card on the field, right? Like, that's not something I want, but I feel like there should be a way to make cards stronger going second than going first. Like make a card that is solid but gets a bonus effect if you have no cards, or if you go second, or whatever. Like this card could have had a different effect that is a little bit weaker, but when you use it while you have no cards on the field, it also gets to destroy a monster, for example. Like, let's say it was the first two effects always happen, and then the third effect only happens if you activated this card while you had no monsters on the field, for example, right? Which, going second, it would have still been the exact same card. Going first, it would have been weaker. This is something that I think is fundamental for the future of non-engine design that needs to happen. And this is the one thing that concerns me with this card. It's also something that concerned me with, for example, Forbidden Crown. Forbidden Crown was the same thing. Forbidden Crown is more powerful when you go first, because some of its the things that it does are more powerful when you go first. You have a board already, you set it, your opponent normal summons something, you crown it, and they can't even link it off or fuse with it or whatever. That becomes, it's a more powerful card when you start. It's still usable going second, Forbidden Crown that is, but it's arguably better when you start. And I think that is not the best way to go about it.
Second, Handtrap. Possibly the best non-lingering hand trap, but it gets really crazy when your opponent has a board, and then you need to not only push through the board, but essentially 2 more interrupts on top of their board. It just becomes too much, especially since this card is so big that you're pretty much guaranteed to die the next turn. It's kind of like...
It's also another point that really adds to this, which we haven't covered in this discussion so far, is that removal is a more premium ability in Yu-Gi-Oh! When you go first. The reason for this is that... Generally, I would say removal is not great in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! When you're going second. Because that's the reason why a card like Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit is probably one of the least favorite ghost hand traps in recent years. The only time you ever see Ghost Ogre seeing play is when it can hit like important spell traps, basically. But for the most part, removal is not a premium in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! When you're going second, because most Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks are so good at replacing the bodies, and most of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards these days get their benefits immediately when they're summoned. Like most cards, like if they summon and activate their effect, they've already done most of the things, right? You look at cards like Draco Tail Arthalion, Lucius, or whatever, like a lot of the cards, you summon them, you get their effect. The Radiant Typhoon Swen, Radiant Typhoon Crocea, whatever, right? Like most things, if they've been summoned, they have already done something. So removing things from your opponent's board is more like playing catch up, right? Like you're just like running behind their card advantage. You're wasting cards while they print cards. Removal going second is not great. When you're going first though, and you already have a board that your opponent is playing into, you're applying more pressure. You're reaching critical mass of removal, and when your opponent can't get anything onto the field, they're not contesting your board, and then if they just pass turn and can't get anything done, then you would just go to the battle phase and kill them, which is why removal is better going first than going second. That's also partially the reason why I think Nibiru feels so much stronger when you're going first than going second. Also, when you go first and you have a board or even a half board, it's just way easier to interrupt your opponent, right? Because you just have more interruptions, so you reach critical mass with your removal. And even if the first pop or second pop or first banish, second banish, one bounce isn't enough, if you keep adding those to the mix, then even Draco Tail is going to struggle to contest your board. They're going to be able to set like some trap cards, but like if you keep removing their monsters, they can't do anything, right? So a lot of things, like on paper, I'm a big fan of this card, but in practice, there's a couple of things that could have been done better with this. And most importantly, that is the fact that it's way better going first than going second, I think. And that is not ideal.
When Mitsu searches Nib at the end of their combo.
Does this apply to stuff like MST and Fallen at the Virtues? I mean, kind of. It's like they're not hand traps. So evaluating removal on hand traps and removal on board breakers is a little bit different, but fundamentally, yes. Like setting a Fallen and the Virtuous when you're going first and you have it to go with your board is more powerful, right? But when you go second and your opponent makes a combo board and you have a Fallen and the Virtues in your hand, how much does that help you in that moment? Not always a lot. Sometimes it's good, but only if the rest of your hand is really strong. But I think it's kind of easy to tell how like the removal effect of that card is better when you go first and you already have a couple of disruptions, rather than when you're going second and your opponent is making a big board and then you're destroying one of those cards after they've comboed, right? So yes, in some ways this is also true for the Fallen and the Virtues.
The third thing about the dragon is a quality of the card going second, and also something that I believe isn't being discussed enough, in my opinion. Truth be told, I think this is weirdly the most important thing about it, and something that is not exclusive to the OCG, but definitely more prominent in past OCG formats compared to the TCG. Unlike all of the most powerful hand traps of the past, this is completely unstoppable, and in the OCG, we've never seen a hand trap this unstoppable. Impulse doesn't stop it, because they don't control a card. Called by and drop it don't stop it, because it activates in the hand. Gamma isn't going to stop it, because you have a monster. It's highly efficient, because it...
That is a good thing. I'll say it straight up. The whole idea of, oh, I can trade my negation for your card that tries to interact with me, that's toxic anyways. That is straight up a good thing. Trading pseudo extenders like cross out, called by, impulse, whatever for hand traps that's not good. Like, okay, we can talk about whether the card itself is fair or not, but cards in general in Yu-Gi-Oh, and I don't even know if that's a hot take at this point anymore, but cards should resolve, all right? Like, there's nothing that the worst Yu-Gi-Oh gameplay is where one player tries to do something, the other player just activates a card that stops it entirely, and then we just trade negates back and forth, like, oh, you activate this, I imperm, then you play extender, I ash, oh, you called by, all right, I have that hand trap, then you cross it out, and then you just win the game because I have 2 cards left and you go full combo. Like, that is not desirable gameplay whatsoever. People have this idea of like, oh, this card exists, so the card that negates it also has to exist. That is not at all what good gameplay looks like. Either a card is fine to exist and then it should resolve, or a card is not fine to exist and then it shouldn't exist. Max C is the prime example of this, right? Like, people use Max C as justification for Called by the Grave or Ash Blossom, when in reality the truth is you shouldn't have to negate Max C because Max C shouldn't exist. That is the thing with a card like Max C.
Only is 1 summon, so that means your opponent would only get 1 draw on their Maxi. The only thing that stops it is crossout, which no one is playing anymore because there's only 1 Maxi. If your opponent activates the dragon, it will resolve.
Good.
So let's compare it to some of the best non-lingering hand traps of the past, such as Nib, or even engine hand traps such as Holisu, Izuna, and Faimana. Nib is a card with 4, maybe 5 methods of counterplay. The first one is to make a negate before the 5th summon to just negate Nib. For example, Ripper, Barone, and these types of cards. The second one is only summon 4 times and compromise the power of your end board. The third one is to summon more than 5 times, but do the summons after 4 during a phase after main phase, such as Killer Tune or Branded, summoning in the end phase. The fourth one is to force the Nib after 5 summons, but hold an extender afterwards. And the fifth one is to play a deck where your engine gets valued from being nibbed, such as Tearlaments or Mitsurugi. That's a pretty specific condition for a deck though, and most decks can't do that. Basically, for Nib, which was one of the strongest non-lingering hand traps of before, there were multiple ways you could play around Nib if you didn't want to play into it. The trigger for the dragon is just way too generic. What kind of deck is not activating a monster effect on the field?
But here's the thing, right? Playing around the card does not necessarily mean you have to negate it or like never activate it, right? The way you play around this card is you just combo through it, right? It's a non-target pop and maybe a bounce. As long as you can figure out a combo that doesn't lose to that type of removal, you are playing through this card, right? That's the whole idea. And that's also how most decks actually these days deal with Nibiru, right? Like you think of most combo decks, they actually, I mean, some decks negate the Nibiru, but most combo decks, like Yami, for example, they just force the Nibiru at a certain point and hold cards to keep playing after, and therefore the Nibiru does something, but doesn't completely stop them from playing, but also doesn't like they don't go full combo through it, right? That's the idea. That's where Nib is the most healthy, is when you can activate it, it doesn't get negated, it resolves, and then your opponent still plays the game. And realistically, most combo decks do this through the new hand trap as well, right? Most combo decks these days will not pass because your opponent non-target destroys one of your monsters and then maybe gets them along to the graveyard to bounce another. If that was the case, then I would have won a lot of games against Malice, for example, when I had Phimena into Arthalion. But in practice, not the case. Not the case all the time. When I play against combo decks, you know, 1 Phimena into Arthalion for like 2 bounces, it not turn ending as it turns out, even if it resolves. So I don't think it's that big of a deal going second, and I think that's truly where the truth is at here. I think going second, this card is completely fine. You shouldn't have to negate it. Most decks will be able to play through it, and I think if it doesn't search Habakiri for their next turn, then it's reasonable, because you actually, if you can't send Herald of the Arclight, you will lose a card in hand. You will not search the most powerful starter of your deck, so maybe the problem is Herald of the Arclight here.
Some Draco Tail hands, if they make a really small board, can just chain block their Altharion and then not use a normal summon effect, or Mitsurugi, which could always make their graveyard trigger last. But we're assuming that they don't use the effect of an Xyz monster during their turn as well. It's just very difficult to never play into this card. The only way to stop this is to negate before activating a monster effect, and I can't really think of many ways that you could do that right now except for Yokel, which is at 1 copy. There have been more powerful hand traps such as Holly Sue, Fire Dark. Column Pop, non-targeting pop, and follow-up is better than this dragon, but it both requires more engine, so that means not every single time they draw Holly Sue will they be summoning Rosin, but it's also stoppable, which means that there's risk associated with it. For example, if you take Vanquish Soul Malice matchup, you can Holly Sue Dark Fire, but sometimes you may be incentivized to take, because if you choose special from deck, Malice was a deck with at least 6 stops, 6 real stops, and a pseudo stop in Maxi, 3 Ash, 3 Impulse, and 2 Max.
And that's good? You think it's good if my Malice opponent goes first, starts comboing, I have Holy Sue Fire Dark in hand, I summon it to at least have a chance in the game, and then I get Impulse? You think that's desirable?
Maxi. If they open the stop and you choose special from deck, your Holly Sue might get no value.
Like, yeah, okay, in the luxury case where you also have Earth, which is a 4-card combo we're talking, by the way. We're talking we have the choice between both effects of Holy Sue, which is Fire, Dark, Earth, plus Holy Sue in hand. Then I can choose to play around Ash or Impulse by taking their Malice name, and still, by the way, completely dying to 1 extender. But if I'm using the more powerful effect of Holy Sue, I could just get negated and my opponent goes full combo unimpeded.
And then you lose instantly. Izuna is another example. Izuna was so bad into Mexi because it was 3 summons, but it also had a ton of cards that could stop it. Called By would stop it. Ogre would stop it. Droplet, Bell, Impulse.
Yeah, it's not good. It's not good.
Ash, if they didn't have Lupus in hand, would also stop it. Fimena is another card that could be called by it, and honestly, Fimena wasn't that powerful unless they were fusing multiple engine, which is only a portion of the hands with Fimena. Even Maxi had 6 stops. So just to clarify, I'm not saying that having stops balances a card, but I'm saying that there were games where these cards would not achieve the ceiling of their power because there were counterplay drawn sometimes. The dragon pretty much always receives full value, which is unheard of in my memory.
Okay, just to clarify, I think that's a good thing. That is a good thing. Hand traps should resolve. And if a hand trap is a problem, if it resolves, then the hand trap shouldn't exist. Period. Maxi resolves. It's a problem for the game. You can't play the game properly. Card needs to be banned, right? Shifter resolves. You just pass the turn because you can't play the game. Shifter's a problem, shouldn't exist. Fundamentally, if any Yu-Gi-Oh card, basically, if any Yu-Gi-Oh card forces you to negate it or you lose the game, it shouldn't exist.
Another aspect of this card is because it has the power of like 2 older hand traps, it means that it gets really strong in a large hand trap deck such as Killer Tune. If you've ever played these older weak hand trap type strategies, then you know these decks are pretty much never that good. 2 decks I'm thinking about right now would be like Voiceless and Centurion, where they have pretty weak engines, but their going second strategy was just to draw multiple hand traps and then resolve their starter.
Beansmith stonks up. You can make Caesar before triggering this. Not really, right? Requiem activates on the field. Even though it tributes itself, you could still get Requiemed on... you can still get Harmonia'd on Requiem.
That's not reliable for a few reasons. The first one is that some decks just play through a ton of the -1 hand traps, and then your lone engine cannot pass their hand traps or the lone interrupt they made. However, the more important reason it's not good, in my opinion, is that you don't actually draw 3 to 4 hand traps every single game. Even if you play 20 hand traps, you will play quite a few games where you only have 1 to 2 hand traps when you go second, and the quality of hand traps goes down after a certain point, so the ones you draw won't line up properly. Plus, if you're playing OCG, sometimes they draw Crossout, Called By, and then you needed to draw another hand trap to reach the same hand trap stop breaking.
This entire loop that we're talking about right now is the least interesting part about modern Yu-Gi-Oh whatsoever. Like, it's not even close. The entire, like, this sort of, like, idea of using low impact hand traps and then the combo decks using all of the ways to negate them is the least interesting way to play modern Yu-Gi-Oh, and it's not even close. I mean, Floodgates come close to it, but it's just like, I don't know. Yu-Gi-Oh cards should resolve going first and going second, realistically. It's okay if you have punishes in your deck, like I like the Fedralia, for example, like Pistials or something. Like, you want to interact with your opponent, but I think like just trying to negate everything your opponent does is like the worst aspect of modern Yu-Gi-Oh sometimes.
Except in this case.
And this, by the way, this does not only go against the hand traps that negate, like Ash, Valor, Imperm, Impulse, Purge, whatever. It's not just against the hand traps. It's also on the flip side, because I know people are gonna twist my words and say that it also goes for the combo decks. So basically what I want is I want less archetypes or less cards that basically say, if you don't negate me, then I win the game for you. Examples of this: Snake Eye Ash, Samsara D Lotus, Dormouse, right? Like those kind of cards, if my opponent normal summons a card and I know if that shit resolves, I lose the game, then of course I'm gonna play cards like Valor, Imperm, Ash, like those. It's a cycle, right? Those cards force that type of gameplay, right? Both sides of the equation are, in my opinion, not welcome, right? I don't want to play that sort of gameplay. So we need less archetypes like the ones I just mentioned, and we need less relevance on those hand traps like Ash, Imperm, Valor, Purge, Impulse, which is why I'm overall, all things considered, still happy that non-engine like this new dragon exists, which doesn't do exactly that.
Since the dragon is so high quality, you might only need one hand.
Tenpai doesn't fall within both sides of the equation. No, it does. Tenpai is the first. Tenpai is the exact same thing. You just normal summon Pydra instead of Snake Eye Ash, and you're going second instead of first, but you're telling your opponent, hey, if this one normal summon resolves, you win the game. It's the exact same thing.
Trap in addition to this card to stop your opponent, especially since this one always resolves, so there are just way more games you can actually stop your opponent with hand traps. Through my personal design philosophy, I've always been a big fan of engine versus engine, and I don't really like it when hand traps actually stop your opponent from making anything, which is why I sincerely hope they do not make more of these.
Yep.
But now we get to what decks are playing it. So obviously the synchro decks such as Elven Notes and Killer Tune are playing it. Everyone knew that was going to happen. The Clown deck is playing it, but more importantly, even decks that don't play synchros are playing it.
I am so excited about the first metagame report post Blazing Dominion.
Mitsurugi, Vanquish Soul, and Radiant Typhoon are compromising their extra deck to play it, and to me that is a bad sign. I know these decks can function without their extra deck, but if you would rather nuke your entire extra deck just to support a hand trap, to me that sounds like the hand trap is too powerful. The last thing I want to discuss about the card is not actually related to gameplay.
I don't know. Is that true? Is people making extra deck concessions to play a card really a problem? Because if we're going from that direction, then it's like, is Super Poly a problem? Is Fallen and the Virtuous a problem? Because people are sacrificing some extra deck space and some utility to play those cards. I'm not sure if that's true. Like, I mean, okay, it does speak for the card, right? It's got to be a powerful card for you to do that, right? That's 100% the case, right? It's like, if someone is willing to play a lot of cards in the extra deck to fit a certain card in their deck, it means the card is powerful. But as I said earlier, I don't think power itself is necessarily an indicator to like make me hate a card, right? Like if this card said reveal 5 cards in your extra deck or 5 synchros in your extra deck and then negate whatever your opponent does, then I'd have a problem with it. It would probably even be more powerful. But like that's not how I look at the card, I suppose.
But that this card is currently a bit infamous in the OCG for being far too expensive.
There's a difference between space and not being able to use it. Of course, yes, that is an extra step. You're not only sacrificing some slots, but you're also willing to sacrifice your ability to go into some of your extra deck when you're going second. But once again, that is one of those aspects that is like, I think that's fine. I think it's okay that when you're going second, you get a good hand trap, you get a chance to compete in the game because you've got strong removal, you got a strong body on the board, but then you can't go SP banish when you're playing into the board. That is a trade-off that some decks are able to take and some decks aren't able to take. That's not necessarily a bad thing, I feel like.
And that's something that's adding to its hype. Because truth be told, my personal opinion is that it isn't as good as the netizens are saying. I'm not trying to downplay this card, but if you read online, OCG players are talking about this card the way TCG players are talking about Maxi, but in my testing, it's not that this card alone is stopping you if your deck is good. It
is literally, it cannot possibly be that broken. Like, this card is very comparable, I think, to a 5 mana fusing away 1 solid Draco Tail. Like a 5 mana fusing into an Arthalion that has like a Pan as material. Nah, it's less powerful than that. It is less powerful than that. It's not even that strong. He's just saying people on the internet are saying it's great. No, I got that. He is basically saying that it's not as broken as people think, and I think that is true. We are talking about this card right now as if it did like everything and as if it did your taxes. In reality, in the TCG without Herald of the Arclight, what this card does is you get a non-target pop and then you get a bounce from Malong. That is what this card is going to do 99% of the time. Depending on the format, maybe you're going to send Enigmaster Packbit instead, or maybe you're going to send like another synchro that's worth it. But it's not like this card is going to single-handedly friggin' do your taxes and everything, right? It's a strong card. It's removal based, and it has restrictions to it. I think all in all, that is powerful but acceptable and maybe even fun. My only gripe with it is that it is stronger going first than going second, which is not perfect execution in my opinion. It should have been the other way around, and then I think it would have been awesome. The way it is powerful. It's going to be strong. It gets like an 8 out of 10 in terms of the execution. Should have been the other way around, stronger going second than going first, but other than that, I think it's pretty solid.
This card is just very, very powerful paired, and the last banlist nuked the hand trap stops, which means that pairing a hand trap, it becomes way more successful now. But I think it's being overrated just a bit because this is the first time since I've moved back where I've seen the player base completely priced out of a staple. The main problem is that ever since the new series, they've increased the base rarity, so Ultimate is a base rarity now. Now, to be fair, they
9,000 yen per piece. Hold up, yen to euro. 9,000 yen is $50 a copy, which TCG players might think like, oh, that's a steal. But 50 euros per copy, I think for Japanese standards is crazy.
did also reduce the amount of ultimates in each set, with there being only 4 now. So it's not...
I think this is also something. I think this card is unlike other cards usually in the OCG. I think this card is not available in every rarity. Like this card is I think this is a high rare exclusive. They have 1 ulti per box, so it's about the same likelihood as reaching it with one secret rare for us. It's basically like TCG rarities for them. Ultimate is its base rarity. Okay.
Actually very difficult to pull, especially since most boxes are going to have 2 ultimates. So it's like 1 in 223 boxes, like 1 in 2.5 boxes to pull this card. Except apparently the set is sold out in Japan, so people can't actually pull more. It's not sold out over here yet, but it's just so important for the format, and most players need 3 to play, so it ended up being more than $40 US. I personally paid 30 for mine thinking I overpaid, and then I go home and once people realized how splashable it went up. And it's still going up. Apparently it's cheaper in China right now than in Japan. Twitter seems like it's indicating shops are buying the card at $55 on base rarity. Even for TCG standards, that is a very expensive staple, and you have to keep in mind...
No, 50 euros. 50 euros is Marshmallow level, and that was the most expensive secret rare in Doom of Dimension on release. $50 is what I paid for the marshmallows I used at YCS Lil, and that was the most secret rare, in the most expensive secret at the time in Doom of Dimension. So a card reaching that price point in the OCG is crazy.
As always, that we make less money. For many players, they can't afford this card at all because a playset costs 1/5 of their monthly salary. That could be paying for half of their rent. I personally only have 1 copy because I can't get more right now. I'm proxying to others with Phantasmes, and my testing group is a majority of people without a set. All of the shops are sold out of the singles, and no one is moving them because if you open the box, you kept your copies for your own decks since it goes into everything except for branded. This card is so expensive, I almost got tempted to start turning on mid-roll ads. This is actually a pay-to-win hand trap, which is usually not a...
It's fine, you could have done it, I would have understood.
...problem in the OCG. But that's all I wanted to cover for the hand trap tonight. I originally wanted to go over everything in the set, but I ended up discussing the hand trap for so long that I think it's better to save the rest for another time. I could go over individually powerful cards, such as the Dominus or the Solemn.
All right. I'll leave you a link to Sunny's video in the description down below if you want to leave some feedback on it. Honestly, I could imagine that a large part of the frustration in the OCG or for OCG players stems from the price, which I try to look at cards from the gameplay aspect, but it is of course hard to, like, you know, just completely ignore the fact that this card seems to be more expensive than anything they've had in the last years in the OCG, or maybe even in like ever. Like I don't think they ever have or usually have cards that are that expensive at the base rarity. So of course the fact that this card is like pretty splashable and really good in a lot of decks, but also so expensive is making it a pretty controversial topic in the OCG, which is 100% understandable. As we don't have it in the TCG yet, and I mean we're guessing it's going to be expensive, but we don't know at all what's going to happen to this card. I am looking at it from the gameplay perspective, and personally I can say I think the gameplay behind this card is a lot healthier than a lot of the other hand traps they've done in the past. I think removal based hand trap is fine. even though it's strong, but realistically it has to be strong, otherwise it won't. Like, removal is just not at a premium in modern Yu-Gi-Oh, especially on a hand trap. That's the reason why most people are playing Impulse, Perch, Ash, Imperm, Veiler, Mourner, whatever, over cards like Ghost Ogre, right? That's just a fact. You know, removal going second is not great, and therefore, if they want removal to be a thing again, which I wholeheartedly support, I think a game where we exchange removal is better than a game where we exchange negation. I'm happy that this is the direction that we're going. I wish it was weaker going first. I wish it was stronger going second. But fundamentally, I'm a fan of the direction. And I guess we'll have to wait and see once we get it. But interesting discussion. It's good to hear from the OCG as always. And I mean, the things that I'm talking about here ultimately are subjective. You know, those are my opinions on the matter. If someone else thinks like the card is just too powerful, so it doesn't matter that it's removal over negation, like it's just too powerful, it shouldn't have been made, that's also okay. That's why we discuss these things. So leave some love for Sunny in the under the video. Make sure to subscribe for more OCG discussions and stuff like that. But yeah, good talk.